a millionaire sees his ex-girlfriend, with whom he broke up 6 years ago, waiting for an Uber with 3 children identical to him. The airport was buzzing with people. The sound of luggage wheels and loudspeakers announcing flights formed a frenetic soundtrack. The atmosphere was buzzing with life and haste, small dramas and reunions at that meeting point, where personal stories quickly crossed paths before everyone left for their destination. In the midst of this orderly chaos, Julian, 42 years, old, tall, with black hair neatly combed back, and a tailored navy blue suit, walked with measured steps. His silver watch gleamed discreetly on his wrist, a watch that alone was worth more than a popular car. No one would have guessed that behind the serious face of a multimillionaire CEO was someone who was tired, bored, and perhaps a little lonely. His life was all meticulously organized, meetings in glassed-in rooms, corrected meals in expensive restaurants, mornings and evenings lulled by the luxurious silence of an apartment where no painting seemed to have really been chosen by him. Next to him was Pablo, his partner and childhood friend, a practical middle-aged man with clever eyes and an easy smile. He wore a slightly creased blazer and held his cell phone in his hand, glancing at Julian from time to time, attentive to the gloomy expressions on his friend's face. These expressions had become more frequent lately, especially on Sundays and holidays. "Don't you think you're overdoing it? I can't understand why you're so keen to be here in the middle of all this commotion," said Pablo, trying to sound light-hearted as he turned away from a family hurrying towards the international boarding gate. Julian didn't reply immediately. He watched the movement ahead, the cars and people crossing like coordinated ants outside, feeling that pang of emptiness that used to appear without warning. The airport bus stopped and a crowd of people got off. Among them, a woman held 3 children by the hand. Julian felt a prickle in his chest, that strange feeling between déjà vu and the instinct to flee. It was Valeria. She hadn't changed much since her college days, despite a few grey hairs standing out discreetly in her light brown hair. She was wearing jeans and a simple blouse, a light jacket slung over her shoulders. Around her, people were moving fast, but she seemed stuck in another time, confident and distracted at the same time. Julian was paralyzed, his mouth dry, unable to take his eyes off her. The children, 2 boys and a girl with dark hair and striking eyes, were jumping and laughing, completely oblivious to the frenzy around them. They had the same features that Julian saw every morning in the mirror. The shape of their faces, their slightly curved noses, the way they frowned when they looked closely at something. It was impossible, he thought. His heart raced, and for a second, the invulnerable CEO was lost in a bundle of doubts, possibilities, and old resentments. Valeria checked her cell phone again, pushed her hair away from her face, and looked out onto the street. Children were chattering, asking her to keep an eye on the planes taking off. Julian finally moved, almost tripping over the nearby bench, attracting a strange look from Pablo, who muttered, "Are you all right, Julian? You've suddenly gone pale." Without replying, Julian advanced through the lobby, skidding briefly as he dodged a forgotten suitcase. He hurried towards Valeria, driven by an urgent need to speak, to ask and to understand. The noise around him died down. Voices seemed to echo from a distant tunnel as he approached the small group. Valeria, sensing his presence, turned slowly, her brown eyes widening for a second. The children's smiles froze and time seemed to pause. But in one swift movement, Valeria gathered her children, gesturing for them to come closer. As soon as she spotted the Uber pulling up to the crowded sidewalk, she hurried over, "Come on, guys!" and guided the children firmly, without looking back. Julian accelerated, almost catching up with the group, his voice breaking. "Valeria, wait!" But she was already getting the children into the car, ignoring the commotion around them. Before he could say anything, the car door slammed shut. The driver pulled away, disappearing into the confusion of the morning traffic. Julian remained, motionless, his breath short, his eyes locked on the bend where the car had disappeared. The shock left him shaking, a jumble of questions and memories throbbing in his mind. Pablo approached, worried, putting his hand on his friend's shoulder. Julian didn't know how to react. He felt betrayed, confused, and a strange spark of hope lit up inside him. Was it possible? Were those children really his? He knew in that second that he wouldn't rest until he found out the truth. The rationale, calculated routine was now marked by an unthinkable fissure, an involuntary promise he had made to himself. I will find answers, even if it costs me everything. The night had come with fine rain, dripping down the glass windows of Julian's apartment. The silence echoed in the modern space, cut only by the ticking of the clock and the sound of cars passing in the street. Julian was sitting on the sofa with his laptop on his lap. His contracted face showed tension, and the dark circles under his eyes were deeper than usual. He was scrolling through old photos on his computer, his hands trembling, while a cold cup of coffee lay forgotten on the table. Suddenly, the door chime sounded. Pablo entered without waiting for an answer, bringing with him an energy that clashed with his surroundings. He slammed the door, dropped his key on the counter and took off his coat, still trying to dry his wet hair with his hands. "You haven't answered me all afternoon, man," grumbled Pablo, throwing himself into an armchair opposite his friend. "I'm getting worried. Are you going to stay there immersed in that laptop until you turn into a statue?" Julian didn't even look at him. He just kept staring at the screen. "I need to find something, Pablo. It doesn't make sense. She's gone." Pablo watched his friend for a few seconds, noticing his slumped shoulders and his laboured breathing. He got up slowly, walked over to the sofa, and tried to look at the screen. Julian pulled the laptop closer, protecting it as if it were a vital secret. "What are you talking about? What are you looking for?" asked Pablo, lowering his voice, trying to calm the atmosphere. From all the networks, Pablo, all of them, she deleted everything. Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. Even her LinkedIn is down. How can someone just disappear like that? A rhetorical question. Julian massaged his temples, looking at Pablo with an expression of despair. "Explain to me once and for all what you saw at the airport today. Why is it making you feel so bad?" Pablo moved closer, looking into his friend's eyes. Julian hesitated. He looked away to the city lights reflected in the glass. He let out a heavy sigh. "You remember Valeria, don't you? From college?" Pablo nodded, curious. I broke up with her, Pablo. 6 years ago. It was cowardly. I didn't even give an explanation. I was just starting out in the company. I didn't think there was any room for love, responsibility, nothing. I thought she'd understand. But I never thought that." He swallowed, the words sounding like stones. "Do you think the children are yours?" Pablo asked with a gentle tone. Julian didn't answer. He picked up a folder of old photos and opened it to the screen. An image of Valeria smiling in the university cafe, golden light framing her face, appeared. Next, the cursor stopped on a blurry photo. An open window, grey sky outside. Finally, an image of a pregnancy test, positive, on top of the economics textbook she used to study. Pablo leaned back on the sofa, scratching his chin. He looked at Julian with a mixture of compassion and alarm. Man, you disappeared from her life without a word. Don't you think that if they were your children, she'd have reason to keep you away? The words hit Julian like a punch. He hugged his knees, staring at his own distorted reflection in the black screen as soon as he closed his laptop. I thought I could control everything. Now, I don't know anything. Pablo stood up, crossed the room, and prepared 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to Julian, who accepted it without saying a word. There was a brief silence, interrupted only by the tap of the rain on the windows. You're still in love with her, aren't you? Pablo asked, his voice low and direct. Julian stared at the glass. I don't know if it's love or guilt. Maybe both. What I do know is that I need to know the truth. I can't stop thinking about it. The looks in the children's eyes, Pablo, were my childhood looks. I saw them. Pablo leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. Man, think about it. Going after her now, after all this time, could hurt everyone. It's not just about you. Resentment could be bigger than you think. Julian looked at him, his jaw hard, his eyes shining with anxiety. It's not fair to end it like this. Not for me, not for her, and certainly not for them. Pablo shook his head, the practical tone disappearing, giving way to real concern. You always thought you could escape problems by solving everything with money, and rightly so. Now it's different. What are you going to do? Julian remained silent, his gaze fixed on the rain, which was now falling harder. For the first time in a long time, he felt a strangely honest weight on his shoulders. He got up slowly, picked up his cell phone and started dialing a mutual friend from college, someone who might know Valeria's whereabouts. I'm going to find her, Pablo. I'm going to look at her, at those children, and listen to what she has to say, no matter what. I'm tired of running away from what I feel and what I've done. I'm going to face everything now. The apartment fell silent, as if even the city had stopped. Pablo just watched, knowing that Julian's decision would change everything from then on. The day dawned blurred by the fine haze of pollution that hung over Mexico City. The strong smell of the street, mixed with that of roasted corn and gasoline, rose from the wet sidewalks. Julian stopped in front of an old building, its walls peeling, the stains of time marking out forgotten cycles. His heart was racing. In his hand was a small volcanic stone keyring, given to him by Valeria on their last anniversary together. For years it had been kept in a drawer, but over the last few nights Julian had started carrying it in his pocket, running his fingers over the rough surface in moments of doubt, as if it could somehow anchor him to the past and give him courage for the present. Maria, the hired assistant, was waiting off to the side. She had small, firm hands, attentive eyes, and an organized agenda. She was the practical, impersonal type. But at that moment she seemed to understand Julian's anxiety. When he hesitated at the gate, she handed him the symbolic keyring, wrapped in the light green scarf she wore on her wrist. "Sometimes little rituals help, Mr. Julian. Take one step at a time," she said with a restrained smile, stepping back to watch him. "Survivors keep memories. The brave face what comes after." He looked at the building, feeling the weight of the choices that had brought him there. His fingers turned the stone, as if seeking warmth in its cold interior. He remembered an old night, Valeria sleeping curled up in his arms, and him silently promising never to let her cry over anything of his. How easy it was to lie to himself. The smell of hot coffee escaped from a window, awakening a bitter hope in him. Was he worthy of that family he had ignored for so many years? Julian finally crossed the gate. He slowly climbed the first flight of steps, walls covered in children's drawings, voices in the distance, a radio playing bachata and bass. At every step, doubts crept in. What if Valeria hated him? What if the children rejected him? The tiled floor cracked under his expensive shoes, as out of place there as he himself was. At the door, he hesitated once more. Maria stood a few meters back, watching serenely. It was unusual to see Julian so vulnerable, his hands restless, his gaze searching for meaning in the cracks in the wall. She touched his arm lightly, and in an almost maternal gesture, placed the stone keyring on his open palm. "Take a deep breath. Hold it tight. There is more truth in hands than in prepared words," she murmured, welcoming all the insecurities of the powerful boss. He obeyed, feeling the object take on an unexpected warmth between his fingers. He remembered the day he had won the stone. Valeria had smiled, saying that it was meant to ward off sorrows and protect dreams. The scene came clear, as if he were in the present. A wave of tenderness washed over him, reviving a hope he had thought extinguished. He knocked on the door. The sound echoed. Footsteps faltered behind the wood. Then the latch turned slowly. Valeria appeared with her hair lightly pinned up with a pencil, her face tired, her soft features hardened by years of struggle, her eyes fixed on the keyring in Julian's hand. For a second, time stood still. There were no accusations or apologies, just the memory of so many broken promises. "What do you want, Julian?" she asked, her voice low, bracing herself against the door, like a hastily erected wall. He tried to speak, but words failed him. He offered the keyring, his eyes watering, a trembling gesture of someone asking permission to return. "I need to know, Valeria. I need to understand. The children. Are they my children?" Valeria flinched, her mouth turning to one side, her eyes fleeing from his for an instant. She gripped the ground with her bare feet, trying to steady herself. "They are," she answered, her voice hoarse, still defensive, as if each word were a suit of armor. "You never came to me. You never answered me. Why now?" At that moment, Julian felt a wave of confusion and shame. He was stumbling over his own certainties. Had he lost the right to that love forever? Would his children accept him? He touched the keyring like someone looking for something strong, beyond himself. "Valeria, I know I made a mistake. I don't want to apologize. I just want to know my children. I want to know who they are." Her eyes softened, anxiety mixed with fear. She took a step back, keeping the door ajar, assessing the man in front of her. The scene between them was marked by doubt. From outside, children's voices could be heard, unmistakable laughter that brought hope. Between Valeria, holding the door, and Julian with the keyring in his hands, there was a chasm, but also a thin bridge built in seconds of sincerity. Julian silently questioned all the truths he held. Why had he believed so much in control, in distance? How far was it possible to repair choices? He squeezed the stone, feeling warmth there, and for the first time since the beginning, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was time to rewrite his story. The smell of strong coffee filled the small establishment in the center of town, where Julian and Valeria sat facing each other, separated by a polished wooden table and years of silence. The windows let in the grey light of the late afternoon, illuminating the dust particles suspended between them. Valeria used her gaze as a shield, avoiding prolonged eye contact, while her fingers played with a yellowed, weathered envelope. Julian kept his hands restlessly on his leg, his fingers compulsively clenching the stone keyring still in his pocket. On the outside, he tried to maintain the posture of a mature, secure man. On the inside, his thoughts were on the edge of a precipice. They didn't exchange many words at first. Valeria only called him there after a long silence at the gate of the building, where she bluntly accused him of having left her alone at the most vulnerable moment of her life. "You've disappeared, Julian. You didn't answer me. You didn't look. How do you expect to suddenly appear and be part of something you didn't build?" she asked, her voice low and heavy, her eyes moist with resentment. Julian tried to justify himself, but his sentences turned into stumbles. I thought it was better, that I could devote myself to my work and then sort everything out. I didn't know I was pregnant." At that moment, Valeria let out a dry, humorless laugh. A flash of hurt crossed her face behind her words. "You always had an explanation, Julian. Always a reason that was too good for others, never for me." There, she held out the envelope on the table. He hesitated, but opened it and carefully pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was Emiliano's birth certificate. On it, his father's name was blank. Julian felt a lump in his throat. The lines filled with Valeria's firm handwriting seemed to scream his absence. "Why didn't you put my name?" he asked, his voice almost gone. Valeria kept her gaze low, but the words came harshly. "Because you weren't there. I spent 9 months waiting for a call, a signal, anything. When I realized that I was truly alone, I decided to protect my son from yet another absence. I thought it was better to grow up without someone who is absent in body than to wait for someone who never comes." The document between the two of them seemed like a watershed. But at the same time, it brought back that night of farewell that Julian had insisted on burying. The flashback began like glass breaking inside. Him leaving her apartment in a hurry, saying he needed focus, that he didn't know what he wanted out of life. All between shadows and empty promises. Valeria then hugged an orange cushion, trying to hold back tears so as not to beg him to stay. He remembered the look in her eyes, so full of silent questions, as he closed the door, thinking there would be time to fix everything later. That night, the scent of jasmine and rain mixed with the bitter taste of goodbye. In the present, the silence was interrupted only by the sound of Valeria's cup spinning on its saucer. Julian ran his hand through his unshaven beard, trying to choose the right words, but the memories consumed him. He saw images in sequence: Valeria sitting alone at doctor's appointments, Emiliano's first steps on the playground, all without a father by his side. He felt invaded by an almost physical sense of guilt, as if every little gesture from the past came back to claim the space that had always been his. Valeria pulled the envelope back, but didn't put it away. She put her hand over the paper as if protecting an even bigger secret. "Listen, Julian, don't make any more trouble. I don't accept you coming and going as you did before. If you want to get close to the children, you're going to have to show me that you can build something slowly, without excuses or empty promises, without disrespecting me. I want respect for me, for my history, for my fears. Do you accept that?" Julian looked at her for a few seconds, absorbing every word. The doubt was still there, hammering away in his chest. Would he have the courage to give up his own instincts for control and pride? He remembered his own father, distant, living on commitments and absences. He remembered the weight of growing up waiting for someone, and had promised himself never to repeat this cycle. But that was exactly the path he had taken. His eyes met Valeria's, and for the first time that afternoon, there was a moment of mutual understanding, a brief interval in which the wounds of the past were revealed as mirrors, not just chasms. Julian was filled with a mixture of shame, humility, and a faint thread of hope. I rested my hand on the table in Valeria's direction, not to touch, but to indicate a genuine willingness. "I accept. I want to try. I'm not sure of anything anymore, but I want to learn to build together, even if it's one brick at a time." Valeria let out a long sigh, seeming to lighten some of the weight she was carrying. The document between them now served as a bridge, no longer a wall. Julian stood there, looking at her with vulnerability and determination, questioning his old certainties and making room for a new understanding of his own limits, and perhaps of love. The grey morning mist was already enveloping the streets when Julian parked his car 2 blocks before Valeria's building. His heart was pounding in his chest at the obsession that he knew was pushing him beyond what was reasonable. It wasn't just about wanting to be a father. It was the compulsive need for certainty, to make up for lost years, or at least to be sure that he wasn't a complete stranger to those children with such familiar features. Over the last few days, he had watched the children from a distance. Once, he met Emiliano coming back from a party at school and distracted himself by picking up a glass of juice that he had left on a bench. She put the straw in her pocket, her hands trembling at the sudden idea of doing a DNA test without asking permission. He didn't say anything to Pablo, his friend, or to Maria, his faithful assistant, who began to notice his strange behavior and tired eyes. That morning, the results arrived by email. Julian opened the digital document with anxious fingers. The numbers were clear. Emiliano was his son. As obvious as the confirmation was, Julian felt the news like a punch, and immediately like a promise. The spiral of guilt was now mixed with the urgency to build something, to make up for lost time. Perhaps too impulsively, she decided to buy presents: new clothes, a building game, dinosaur books. She knocked on the door with bags in her hands, trying to fake a smile. The reception was frosty. Valeria opened the door slowly, standing next to Emiliano, looking at her son and then Julian suspiciously. "I'm not here to fight. I just want to talk," he insisted, offering her the presents. She hesitated, but let him into the modest room, filled with the smell of baking bread and children's drawings on the walls. The children opened the packages shyly, while Julian tried to improvise a conversation. Valeria kept her distance, shoulders tensed as she tidied the kitchen table. That day, however, Julian stayed longer than he should have, until, almost at the end of the visit, Valeria found the digital lab notification open, mixed in with the emails from the computer, shared with her friend Mariana. Shock froze her body before she could say a word. She closed the laptop at once, paralyzed. By the time Julian noticed, it was too late. "You did a DNA test without asking my permission?" Valeria's voice came out low, cold, a tremor of indignation running through every word. "How could you? How? Did you get the sample? Did you spy on the children?" Julian tried to argue. "Valeria, I had to be sure. I had to." But Valeria, furious and hurt, interrupted. "You don't trust me. You never have. It's not about parenthood. It's about control. You don't learn, Julian. You still think you can ride roughshod over everyone and everything." Her anger began to affect the children, who looked at each other, uneasy at the heavy atmosphere. The door opened abruptly. Mrs. Carmen, Valeria's mother, entered the apartment unannounced. She hadn't liked Julian since college, and the whole thing seemed to fuel her worst fears. "I knew he'd come back with problems," she muttered, putting herself between her daughter and Julian. "These rich men think everything can be bought." In the midst of the tense atmosphere, only Emiliano, curious, approached Julian. The boy held one of the toys still in his hand and spoke softly to Maria, who was also there, trying to calm him down. "Why are they fighting?" Maria, not knowing exactly how to act, knelt down next to the child and replied in a soft voice, "Sometimes people do the wrong thing because they're afraid of losing something important. This isn't about money, it's about hope." The phrase echoed through the room, a counterpoint to the uproar. Suddenly, Julian realized how selfish he was being. He saw the look on Valeria's face. It wasn't just anger. It was a mute plea for some respect, protection from a world that had already hurt her too much. Carmen slammed her hand on the table, accusing Julian of wanting to take the children away, of not respecting borders or feelings. The atmosphere was weighed down by old and new weights. For the first time, Julian felt ashamed of his own actions. He noticed Emiliano watching him, wanting an answer, and at the same time, fearing what would come. It was a unique chance, but not by force, not at the pace of the blind control he had always sought. He remembered Maria's words and understood the difference between rights and genuine bonds. In a sudden silence, Julian positioned himself in front of Valeria and Doña Carmen. He took the presents he had brought, put them on the table and, in an unexpected gesture, addressed his mother-in-law with respect. "Mrs. Carmen, I understand that you are afraid. I may be a father, but I'm going to respect Valeria and the children's limits. I want to be here by choice, not by imposition." He looked at Valeria, his voice breaking. "You're right. I can't take anything by force. If you don't want me here, I'll take a step back." The impact was immediate. Valeria stared at him in bewilderment. Carmen sighed awkwardly. Emiliano hugged the toy, this time smiling, and Maria touched Julian's shoulder. Maybe everything would change, or maybe it wouldn't. But Julian's choice, in front of everyone, wasn't for victory. It was out of respect. As he left the door open, offering him the first real lesson in belonging. Give space to be accepted, not to invade. The luxury apartment seemed colder than ever that night, where silence was once synonymous with comfort. Now it weighed like a sentence. The skyscrapers of Mexico City mingled with the faint drizzle that poured through the large windows. Julian felt time turning like a knife, ever since Daniela, his fiancée, a ruthless businesswoman and expert strategist, had discovered the truth. She analyzed everything from the smallest details of the contracts to the fake smiles in a casual conversation. And when she heard about the children, she was quick to confront him. Julian was just finishing his tie for a dinner with investors when the door was thrown wide open. Daniela walked in, carrying a black briefcase and her cracked cell phone. Her eyes had the calculated storm of those who feel betrayed and are about to attack. Her voice was low, cold, and her body almost rigid with indignation. "Is that why you disappeared for so many nights? To visit that woman and those bastards? You've got yourself into a much bigger mess than you realize, Julian. I bet my name on you, on your projects, and you throw it all away on a whim." A mixture of hurt and spite overflowed from her, each word plunging like a knife into his chest. He tried to argue, but his voice failed him. Daniela remained incisive. "Either you disappear from their lives forever, or I'll end it all, understand? I'll show everyone what kind of man you are. I'll destroy the images of the perfect family, throw your business alliances in the garbage can, drive away all the investors, and I'll finish what's left." The threat hung heavy in the air. Julian stepped back, feeling the blow. It wasn't a simple choice. On the one hand, the promise of personal and professional stability built up over the years. On the other, his newly discovered children and the hope of a fresh start with Valeria. The climate turned even more sour in the following days. Rumors began to spread quickly. Anonymous messages to the press, emails with photos of Julian repeatedly entering Valeria's building, cold notes about irresponsible parenting, and conflicts of interest. Mariana, his assistant, suddenly entered the room as Julian was unsuccessfully trying to calm down a reluctant investor on the phone. "They're leaving, Julian. The International Fund has suspended negotiations. The press is slaughtering you, saying you're a double, a liar, that you used company money for personal affairs." Mariana arrived panting, trying to hold back her tears. "This is all my fault. I should have been more attentive. I saw you looking strange, distracted. I could have asked, I could have—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. Julian put his hand on his assistant's back, feeling the guilt eating away at what little pride remained. "Mariana, it's not your fault. I'm the one who made a mistake. I was too impulsive. I tried to fix everything myself. Now things are falling apart, and maybe that's just what I deserved." Mariana's eyes filled with tears. "I should have told you to think again before getting so involved. Now you're going to lose all that. For what? For a memory? For a past? You could give up, let it all go. Maybe Daniela will still come around. Maybe you'll be able to go back to who you were." Julian kept his face turned towards the window. The phone was receiving incessant notifications. Press, lawyers, former partners. His name was dragged across the floor. He looked at Mariana, For a moment he thought of giving in, of retreating to preserve what was left of the empire he had fought so hard for. But immediately he felt an emptiness, a deafening thud. Life ruled by fear was not life, it was imprisonment. The memory of Emiliano's features, the children's shy smiles, Valeria's embarrassed embrace, all echoed more strongly than Daniela's voice or the threats of the business world. Julian hesitated, his hand trembling. Mariana was waiting for his answer, her eyes watering as she waited for the outcome, afraid of hearing the wrong decision. She took a deep breath, letting the mature words escape her throat. I can't give up on them. I've spent too long running away from what really matters. If losing everything is the price for getting back the ones I love, then it's a price I'll pay. Mariana nodded silently, finally understanding the weight of her choice. Deep down, amid all the chaos and ruin, this was the first time Julian was sure of his own path. The fine rain dripped down the living room windows, drawing uncertain paths through the glass, while the sweet smell of coffee filled the small apartment. At the table, Julian felt light-hearted for the first time in a long time, watching Valeria organize the lunchboxes, while Emiliano, Leo, and Anna ran around with backpacks and laughter. It was a simple routine, but woven with delicacy, as if everyday life was trying, little by little, to stitch together the pieces of the destroyed past. There were still strangers, silences, and small hesitations, but among them something new emerged, a silent agreement of hope. In that fortnight, something had changed. For the first time, Emiliano forgot to call him just Julian, and, in an affectionate slip of the tongue, dropped a pie when he asked for help with his math homework. The word echoed in Julian's ears, and he disguised his emotion with a shy smile. Valeria noticed, smiled in a corner, and let him hug his son without the protective vigilance of before. Little by little, their routines blended together. Julian picked the children up from school, washed the dishes while Valeria prepared juice in the kitchen, learned the songs from the cartoons, and sat on the sofa, surrounded by children, to watch dinosaur movies. Everything went smoothly until the afternoon when Leo came home from school, complaining of abdominal pain. At first, Valeria attributed it to anxiety or some childish nonsense. But the hours passed and the pain increased, bringing high fever and chills. Julian saw the desperation in Valeria's eyes. She tried to hide her fear, but her hands were shaking, undecided between dialing the pediatrician and trying to keep them calm. It was Julian who took the lead, suggesting that they take Leo to hospital immediately. Valeria hesitated, embarrassed, to cede control to the man who until recently had been just a shadow in their lives. But at that moment there was no room for pride or resentment. "I need you now. Let's go together," she murmured, almost without realizing it, handing over the reins that she had always held so firmly. They got into the car under a cloudy sky, Leo lying in Valeria's arms in the back seat, Julian driving fast along the wet avenues. At the hospital, the two of them took turns answering to the medical staff, signing authorizations, calming Emiliano and Anna, who were crying in the corridor. For the first time, they cooperated without arguing, sharing the fear and responsibility, each protecting Leo in their own way. Julian read the doctor's instructions in a low voice, while Valeria held her son's hand, her eyes fixed on the boy's frowning eyelids. It wasn't exactly reconciliation, but a mutual admission. They were stronger together. While they were waiting for the report, Julian realized that he had an old volcanic stone keychain in his pocket, given to him by Valeria years ago and recently recovered. He always clutched it in moments of doubt, like an amulet or promise. Now he held it out to Valeria, who stared at it in surprise. He clasped her hand over it, saying quietly, "This has always been our safe haven. I know I made mistakes, but I want to build something new with you, together." Valeria's gaze lingered on the keyring, once a symbol of finality, now transformed into new hope. At that moment, it was no longer an object from the past, but a silent pact of reconstruction. A family inventing a new origin for itself. The doctor finally appeared, informing us that Leo needed a small operation, but that everything would be fine. Valeria collapsed in relief, her legs wobbling. Julian supported her, holding her shoulder. For the first time, Valeria blurted out, "I couldn't have done it without you. I became the lioness because I had to be alone. But now I want to try to trust." Julian wiped his face with his trembling hand and pulled the children along, who were watching everything in silence. They stayed together, hugging in the corridor, feeling that fear and love were forcing them to be more, to overcome the guilt of the past. When at last, at night, they could see Leo awake from the anesthesia, Valeria held out the stone keychain to Julian. A small gesture, but full of meaning. "We're in this together." Julian squeezed her hand, looked at the children, and murmured, "Now we're a real family." Valeria, touched, smiled sincerely and agreed, "Yes, we are." The day dawned grey, with heavy clouds oppressing the sky over Mexico City. Julian woke up early, feeling the weight of time and decisions all over his body. He found Valeria in the kitchen, her eyes tired and her hands clenched around a cup of cold coffee. The children were asleep after restless nights, and the silence of the morning seemed too fragile, like glass about to shatter. The phone vibrated on the table. It was Mariana. Her voice trembled on the other end of the line. "Julian, there's been a story on the internet. They accused Valeria. They talked about child neglect, misuse of school funds. They said that you and she faked documents to hide paternity. There are photos, witnesses, everything fabricated. Daniela is behind it." The shock took Julian's breath away. He knew what Daniela was capable of. He had learned that his ex-fiancée could be lethal when wounded. But attacking Valeria was a point of no return. He exchanged a desperate glance with Valeria, who was trying to keep control, but was already shaking. Within minutes, dozens of messages arrived. Principals, parents, the school board, all asking for explanations, threatening prosecution. Soon, an official notification informed Valeria of her suspension and immediate removal from activities with children. At the end of the morning, Daniela called. Julian answered the call on speakerphone. His face hardened. On the other end, Daniela's voice was sharp, merciless, almost satisfied. "You made your choice, Julian. You pushed my name into the mud. You preferred that woman and her children. Now she's going to pay for all your arrogance. I warned you not to stand up to me. I just want you to admit publicly that it was all a setup, that she manipulated you, that she promised you her children in exchange for money. With that, maybe I'll clear your name. Otherwise, I'll destroy the rest of what's left for you. And don't think I don't have enough proof." Valeria held Julian's arm, her eyes full of dread. She almost whispered, "I can't lose everything because of you. Or my students, Julian." There was a tense moment, almost a sepulchral silence. Julian felt his hands sweating, his throat dry. He could follow Daniela's hatred, deny it, blame Valeria, protect himself. It was the easiest way. Just give in, sign the confession. The business world would understand, perhaps even forgive him. But there, in front of Valeria, who had trusted, him after all the abandonment, who had given him back his place in the children's lives, he realized the true size of his choice. He remembered the volcanic stone keyring, now attached to the key of the new small house they were renting. It was a humble symbol, but loaded with meaning, sacrifice, reconstruction, truth. Julian pressed the object into his pocket. Feeling his resolve grow, he raised his voice firmly and brought the phone closer to his mouth. "Daniela, enough! You want to destroy everything because you can't deal with the fact that I chose them, not you. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to betray the woman I love, just to clean up my image. You can go on, you can ruin my reputation, take away my contracts, my houses, everything. But you'll never touch my conscience or my family. The truth is the only thing I have left, and I won't give it up to protect you. What you're doing is cruel. It's inhuman. I'm no longer the man you manipulated. You can publish whatever you want. From now on, my life is with them. You've lost." On the other end, the line went silent, except for the restrained sound of Daniela's angry breathing. She hung up without reply, ending the call like someone slamming a door in anger. Valeria lowered her face, struggling between relief and fear of the uncertain future. He could see the doubt in her eyes. Had she been right or wrong to trust this new Julian? He touched her hand respectfully and tenderly. "I'll always be honest, no matter what. All that I've lost in front of the world is little compared to what I've regained by your side." Valeria let a few tears flow, accepting the risk. Julian hugged her, feeling the house full of changes, of an unpredictable future, but real for the first time. The children woke up nearby, calling for their parents, indifferent to the chaos beyond the walls. Between the crumbling world and his newfound honesty, Julian made his final choice. The courthouse was cold, firm in its concrete and dark wood architecture. The light came in through narrow fillets, threatening to break the austerity of the environment, but the atmosphere there remained tense and heavy, as if Valeria's story hung in the air, about to be judged not just by judges, but by all the doors that had closed in her life. That morning, the hall was packed. Old relatives, glances from acquaintances, scandal-hungry journalists, and, in the background, Julian clasped his hands as if he wanted to hold time, fear, and hope in them. Next to them, Emiliano, Leo, and Anna, wearing their best clothes, felt the weight of what could be a new loss or a new beginning. Valeria sat upright in the dock, her face white, but her eyes glowing with a silent fire. Daniela, sitting a few rows back, watched everything with a cold, satisfied expression, as if she were sure of the outcome she had set up. Julian took a deep breath, remembering the sleepless nights rereading all the documents, the exhausting conversations with lawyers, and the countless times he had promised himself that, if he had to, he would face the world to protect the woman. and children who finally gave him meaning. The hearing was exhausting and cruel. Manipulated witnesses recounted Valeria's alleged misdeeds at the school. Parents pressed for justice, and journalists eagerly took down every word. Julian felt anger and helplessness boiling up inside him, but he forced himself to remain calm, in front of the children, holding Anna's hand as she cried silently. The height of despair came when the prosecutor asked for a conviction, arguing that neither Julian nor Valeria had enough integrity to raise any child. Julian's heart almost stopped when the sentence seemed close, a horrible silence dominating the space. Valeria trembled, but didn't lower her head. Then one of the lawyers stood up, waving a brown envelope. They said that a document had been handed in anonymously that morning. There was the original report from the school's ledgers, showing that the false signatures had been inserted later, and that Valeria had tried to report the irregularities months before the scandal came to light. The judge opened the envelope, analysed the sheets, whispered with the other members of the court, and, after long minutes, announced Valeria's total absorption of any guilt. The hall erupted, half in relieved sighs, half in protests. Julian burst into tears right there, hugging the children tightly, while Daniela rushed out, overcome by the unexpected. Valeria got up slowly, like someone waking up from a long nightmare, and walked down the corridor to find Julian. He was kneeling in front of Emiliano, silently thanking life for this new chance. Valeria stopped in front of him and opened her bag, taking out the volcanic stone keychain, a symbol of everything they had faced together, from the ancient days of their youth, through the painful reconciliation, to this moment of liberation. She held the keyring in Julian's hands, wiping away his tears lovingly. "I want you to have this," she said, her voice hoarse. "It's always been more than an object. It's proof that what's strong doesn't break. It changes shape, but it endures." Julian squeezed the keyring as if he could merge with the rock, with the memory of all the disagreements and new beginnings. He looked at Valeria, wrapped her in a hug, and finally allowed himself to collapse, saying in a trembling voice, "I'm home at last. I'm home." The children joined in the collective hug, laughing and crying, as if in that gesture all their past suffering dissolved into promise and forgiveness. When, outside the courthouse, the family was getting ready to return to their routine, Julian felt someone approach him and hand him a sealed envelope. He opened it right then and there, curious and afraid. Inside was an anonymous letter. The words revealed that Julian had another son, Ivan, the fruit of a brief relationship before he met Valeria. There were details, a photo of the child smiling, the address of where she could find him. For a moment, the world seemed to spin again, but Julian, still clutching the keyring in his hand, looked at Valeria for a reaction. She was tired, but she conveyed confidence. Challenges no longer destroyed, they only added. Valeria let a few tears flow, accepting the risk. Julian hugged her, feeling the house full of changes, of an unpredictable future, but real for the first time. The children woke up nearby, calling for their parents, indifferent to the chaos beyond the walls. Between the crumbling world and his newfound honesty, Julian made his final choice. The courthouse was cold, firm in its concrete and dark wood architecture. The light came in through narrow fillets, threatening to break the austerity of the environment, but the atmosphere there remained tense and heavy, as if Valeria's story hung in the air, about to be judged not just by judges, but by all the doors that had closed in her life. That morning, the hall was packed. Old relatives, glances from acquaintances, scandal-hungry journalists, and, in the background, Julian clasped his hands as if he wanted to hold time, fear, and hope in them. Next to them, Emiliano, Leo, and Anna, wearing their best clothes, felt the weight of what could be a new loss or a new beginning. Valeria sat upright in the dock, her face white, but her eyes glowing with a silent fire. Daniela, sitting a few rows back, watched everything with a cold, satisfied expression, as if she were sure of the outcome she had set up. Julian took a deep breath, remembering the sleepless nights rereading all the documents, the exhausting conversations with lawyers, and the countless times he had promised himself that, if he had to, he would face the world to protect the woman and children who finally gave him meaning. The hearing was exhausting and cruel. Manipulated witnesses recounted Valeria's alleged misdeeds at the school. Parents pressed for justice, and journalists eagerly took down every word. He looks into Valeria's eyes, and, with the family gathered around him, formalizes the wish he has kept in silence for years. He takes the volcanic stone keyring, a silent witness to his falls and ascents, and places it in her hands. Valeria, smiling, holds the object tightly and says, "Let this be a promise that nothing, not even our mistakes, will ever separate us again." The children interrupt the scene with requests for attention. Ivan pulls Julian aside to show him a drawing, all of them together, holding hands under a bright blue sky. Julian feels his heart soften as he sees his own face scrawled next to all his children, the name Papa written in the crooked letters of someone who is only beginning to learn the bond but already understands how much it matters. Forgiveness didn't come in an instant, but was built up over a shared routine, sincere conversations with Valeria on starry nights on the balcony, respectful silences, and the children's laughter. Sarah approaches Valeria, offering a freshly baked loaf of bread, and the two exchange complicit glances. The past full of disagreements now gives way to presence and care. As they dine together, Julian observes every detail of their new life. Anna's hands covered in sauce, Leo confiding a secret to Emiliano, Valeria's affectionate gaze at Ivan, who, every day, allows himself to trust her a little more. After dinner, Julian pulls Valeria into a corner of the room, away from the watchful eyes of the children. He sits down next to her on the old sofa, covered in a colourful blanket they bought together at the neighbourhood market. Wrapping her hands in his, he takes a deep breath and chooses his words as carefully as a craftsman sands a rough stone. I can't erase the past or give back the time stolen by my choices. But I have learned that redemption happens every day, in small decisions. I promise that this time I'll stay. You taught me the value of fighting, of losing in order to win what really matters. Valeria squeezes his hand and replies with a serene and honest smile. Family isn't just about blood ties, it's about choice. We chose to forgive each other and come together, and that's what will keep us strong. We're not perfect, but we're together, and that's what makes everything real. Outside, a fine rain begins. Julian gets up and calls the children out onto the balcony. They all run to see the drops running down the glass. a simple spectacle, but one that imprints a memory in Ivan's attentive eyes. Julian takes the volcanic stone keyring and hangs it on the nail next to the front door. There, it becomes a symbol of everything they have endured: storms, separations, reunions, and hope. No luxuries, no big promises, just everyday honesty, faith renewed every morning. The certainty that no matter how many times the past tries to knock on the door, the family will continue to choose to stay together. Night falls, and Sarah tucks the children into their makeshift blankets, singing an old song from Julian's childhood. Valeria rests her head on Julian's shoulder and sighs. He, still teary-eyed from the silent emotion of the moment, whispers, "I'll never run away from what really matters again." The silence that follows is welcoming, full of everything that has been lost and found again. The stone, the rain, the mixed voices in the house form a perfect metaphor. Rebuilding, forgiving, starting over. The real home is the one we choose to live in together, day after day. Because above all, what saves a family is not successes. It's the courage to start again. Together, always. What would you do if you had a second chance to fix the past? Leave your comment below. Were you moved by Julian and Valeria's journey? Did you like the video? Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss stories like this. Share this with someone who needs to remember. Family isn't just about blood ties, it's about choice.